Good morning and welcome to the Clovis Brief. I'm Clovis and this is Saturday, May 23, 2026. Let's start with the weather for northern Illinois. Right now, it's 55 degrees, feeling like 54 with overcast skies and a light wind at about 4 miles an hour. Today, we're looking at a high of 76 and a low of 54 with some light drizzle expected, just about 0.05 of an inch of precipitation. Tomorrow, Sunday, we'll see a high of 78 with overcast conditions continuing. The pattern holds through the week with temperatures climbing. Monday hits 79, Tuesday reaches 82, and Wednesday settles back to 77, all under mostly overcast skies. So not much sunshine in the forecast, but decent temperatures for late May. Today's episode is packed. We've got major breaking news from China with a devastating coal mine disaster, updates on the Ebola outbreak that's now reached the third largest on record, and developments in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. On the security front, we're tracking a CISA data leak that has lawmakers demanding answers, multiple critical vulnerabilities including a Drupal SQL injection flaw, and the arrest of a botnet administrator. In tech news, we'll cover Microsoft canceling Claude Code licenses, Anthropic's Project Glasswing update, and some fascinating stories about everything from shipping laptops to refugee camps to why Japanese companies diversify so much. Let's dive in. We're starting with breaking news from China, where state media is reporting a catastrophic coal mine explosion. According to the BBC, at least 90 people have been killed in a gas explosion at a coal mine in northern China's Shanxi province. Reuters and ABC News are also covering this story, with initial reports indicating 4 confirmed dead and dozens trapped underground with elevated carbon monoxide levels. This is now among China's deadliest mining accidents in recent years. NPR reports that coal mine safety has been a persistent challenge in China despite government efforts to improve conditions. The incident occurred in Shanxi, which is one of China's major coal-producing regions. Rescue operations are ongoing, but the elevated carbon monoxide levels are severely complicating recovery efforts. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo has reached a critical phase. Ars Technica reports that the outbreak is now the third largest recorded and is spreading rapidly. The BBC World Service is reporting that the World Health Organization has raised the risk level to very high in the Democratic Republic of Congo. According to Reuters, Uganda has confirmed 3 new Ebola cases, bringing their total to 5. NPR is covering the human side of this story with residents of Bundibugyo, Uganda, the district after which this particular Ebola virus strain is named, expressing frustration about the stigma associated with their region. The outbreak is particularly concerning because contact tracing efforts are faltering, according to Bloomberg, which is allowing the virus to outrun containment measures. From the ongoing conflict in Europe, Reuters reports that a Russian drone strike killed 1 person and wounded 9 at a funeral near Ukraine's Sumy region. Reddit's r/World News has this as a major story, with Ukraine's President Zelensky stating that Ukrainian forces have liberated 590 square kilometers of territory this year, forcing Russia toward diplomacy. The BBC is reporting that Putin has vowed retaliation after accusing Ukraine of hitting a student dormitory. This latest exchange comes as Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in India for Quad talks, attempting to reset strained ties between the U.S. and India, according to both Reuters and NPR. The diplomatic efforts come at a crucial time as tensions continue in the region. Moving to domestic politics, Reddit's r/Politics has multiple major threads on significant developments. NBC News and The Hill are reporting that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has resigned, with Reddit featuring a megathread on the resignation. PBS NewsHour is examining Gabbard's record and her impact on the U.S. intelligence community. Additionally, Politico and multiple sources are covering that Congressman Steve Cohen has introduced 6 articles of impeachment against Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. According to Newsweek via Reddit, this represents a significant escalation in Democratic efforts to hold the Supreme Court accountable. The Hill reports that Supreme Court tensions are running particularly high this session. The Trump administration is making major changes to immigration policy. NPR is reporting that the Department of Homeland Security will now force foreigners currently in the U.S. to apply for green cards from their home countries abroad. This represents a significant shift in immigration processing. NBC News reports that this has sparked immediate controversy, with immigration advocates calling it unnecessarily cruel. Meanwhile, The Hill is covering that critics say Trump's stated pretext for potential action against Cuba doesn't square with reality. PBS NewsHour examined Trump's Cuba strategy, noting it echoes his Venezuela playbook but with key differences that experts are pointing out. On Capitol Hill, there's significant internal Republican tension. NBC News and The Hill report that GOP senators were reportedly screaming at Todd Blanche during a briefing about Trump's proposed anti-weaponization fund. According to Politico, this Republican defiance over the anti-weaponization fund is setting up a direct confrontation with Trump. Ted Cruz confirmed to NBC that the meeting became heated, describing senators as vocally opposing certain aspects of the proposal. This internal party conflict is creating uncertainty about Trump administration priorities moving forward. In California, ABC News is reporting that evacuation orders have been issued for 40,000 people due to a chemical tank leak in Southern California. According to NBC News, the threat of a chemical explosion has prompted mass evacuations. AP News reports authorities are treating this as a major emergency situation with ongoing containment efforts. This is a developing story that we'll continue monitoring. Internationally, Pope Leo is making news with a visit to Italy's so-called Land of Fires. AP News reports the Pope visited this region where families are seeking justice for children lost to toxic waste exposure. Reuters quotes the Pope as decrying the dizzying profits earned by companies that pollute. This visit highlights ongoing environmental justice issues in southern Italy where illegal toxic waste dumping has been linked to increased cancer rates, particularly among children. SpaceX launched its biggest Starship yet. NPR, PBS NewsHour, and AP News all report that SpaceX successfully launched its most beefed-up Starship mega rocket on a test flight. The BBC World Service covered the launch as SpaceX's Starship V3 rocket lifted off on what they're calling a major milestone test flight. This represents the latest iteration of Elon Musk's vision for interplanetary travel and heavy-lift launch capabilities. Turning to local news for Chicago and Northern Illinois, we'll start with some troubling stories from the region. WGN News Chicago is reporting that a teenager was seriously injured in an alleged attack in Park Ridge. According to their coverage, police are now seeking surveillance footage from the area to identify suspects. The incident has left the community shaken, and authorities are asking anyone with camera systems in the vicinity to check their footage from the time of the attack. Park Ridge police have not yet released details about the nature of the attack or the teen's current condition, but they're describing the injuries as serious. Also from WGN, there's been an officer-involved shooting at a hospital in Michigan City, Indiana. That's just across the border but affects the broader Chicagoland region. An officer was shot in an emergency room at the hospital. Details are still emerging about what led to the shooting and the condition of the officer involved. This is obviously a concerning incident given that it occurred within a hospital emergency room where people go seeking safety and medical care. Reddit's r/Chicago has a highly upvoted post about someone documenting their departure from the city. A resident posted that they're moving to New York after 5 years in Chicago, saying they'll forever miss this beautiful city. The post, which received over 1,500 upvotes, captured a lot of nostalgic sentiment in the comments about what makes Chicago special: the lakefront, the neighborhoods, the food scene. It's one of those threads that really showcases the affection people develop for the city, even when circumstances take them elsewhere. On a lighter note from Reddit r/Chicago, someone posted about getting a pleasant surprise while watching BoJack Horseman. Apparently the animated show featured Chicago in an episode, which delighted local viewers. That post got several hundred upvotes, with commenters sharing other times they've spotted Chicago references in unexpected places in media and entertainment. In business news affecting the region, WGN Chicago reports that Guzman Y. Gomez has closed all Chicagoland restaurants effective immediately. The Australian fast casual chain had been attempting to establish a presence in the Chicago market, but apparently has decided to pull out entirely. No explanation was given for the sudden closure, but it leaves former employees suddenly without jobs and customers disappointed. The chain had locations in several Chicago area neighborhoods. From the south suburbs, WGN is covering that Calumet City has laid off 46 workers due to what officials are calling profound fiscal challenges. This is a significant number of layoffs for a city of Calumet City's size and speaks to the budget pressures facing many Illinois municipalities. The city government is facing revenue shortfalls and rising costs, forcing these difficult decisions that will impact both the workers losing their jobs and the level of services the city can provide. On a somber note, WGN covered the funeral held for fallen Chicago Fire Department firefighter Stephen Decker. The service drew first responders from across the region to honor Decker's service and sacrifice. These firefighter funerals are always deeply moving events, with the traditional honors and the sea of uniforms representing the brotherhood and sisterhood of the fire service coming together to support the family. Moving into technology news, and we're starting with a story that's making waves in the AI world. The Verge, as reported on Hacker News, says Microsoft has started canceling Claude Code licenses internally. This is significant because it reflects how the shift to token-based AI billing is absolutely blowing up annual budgets in just months. Reddit's r/artificial is covering this extensively, with the story receiving over 700 upvotes. Essentially, what's happening is that Microsoft had purchased enterprise licenses for Anthropic's Claude for internal use. But the consumption-based billing model means that heavy users can burn through enormous amounts of budget far faster than traditional software licensing. This is forcing companies to rethink how they budget for and deploy AI tools. It's a canary in the coal mine moment for enterprise AI adoption. The technology is powerful, but the cost model is still being figured out. Anthropic themselves are in the news with an update to Project Glasswing. Hacker News is highlighting this story, which received over 400 upvotes. Anthropic's research post details their initial findings from Glasswing, which is their effort to create more interpretable AI systems. The goal is to understand what's actually happening inside large language models when they process information and generate responses. This matters enormously for AI safety and alignment. If we can't understand how these systems are making decisions, it's very difficult to ensure they're behaving as intended or to debug them when they're not. The initial update suggests they're making progress on mechanistic interpretability, though the work remains in early stages. Over on Hacker News, there's a fascinating personal story about shipping a laptop to a refugee camp in Uganda. This post from notesbellex.com received 473 points and sparked a rich discussion. The author details the logistical challenges of getting technology to someone who needs it in a refugee camp setting, everything from customs issues to finding reliable shipping methods to ensuring the device is actually useful given local infrastructure constraints. The comments are full of people sharing similar experiences trying to donate or deliver technology to underserved areas around the world, along with practical advice about organizations that facilitate this kind of technology transfer. It's a reminder that the digital divide is real and that bridging it requires both intention and creative problem-solving. Hacker News is also featuring an essay from David O'Kays about why Japanese companies do so many different things. This received 689 points and over 300 comments. The piece explores the keiretsu system and Japanese corporate culture that leads companies like Yamaha to make both motorcycles and musical instruments, or Mitsubishi to be in everything from cars to banking to heavy industry. The explanation involves historical factors including post-war reconstruction policies, different approaches to corporate diversification, and cultural attitudes toward loyalty and long-term thinking versus quarterly earnings. It's a fascinating look at how different business cultures produce radically different organizational structures. From the security world crossing into tech news, Hacker News is discussing that Bamboo Studio has been violating the Prusa Slicer AGPL license since their fork. This comes from Joseph Prusa himself on Twitter. For context, Prusa Slicer is open-source 3D printing software released under the AGPL license, which requires derivative works to also be open-source and to share modifications. Bamboo Lab forked the code to create Bamboo Studio but allegedly hasn't been complying with the license terms. This is a significant issue in the open-source 3D printing community because Prusa Research has been a major contributor to open-source 3D printing, and license violations undermine the entire ecosystem. The discussion includes debate about how to enforce AGPL compliance and whether commercial 3D printer companies are acting in good faith toward the open-source community. Lobsters is featuring a post about GNU-Tella titled "A Protocol Outliving the World That Created It." This scored 94 points and dives into the history of the GNU-Tella peer-to-peer file-sharing protocol. Remember LimeWire? That used GNU-Tella. What's remarkable is that GNU-Tella network nodes are still operating today, long after the peer-to-peer file-sharing era supposedly ended. The article from Rick Carlino explores how truly decentralized protocols can persist even when the companies and communities that created them move on. It's a meditation on protocol design and digital archaeology, these ghost networks still routing packets according to rules written 25 years ago. Deno 2.8 has been released, according to Hacker News, with 362 points. Deno is the JavaScript and TypeScript runtime created by Ryan Dahl, who also created Node.js. This release includes improvements to TypeScript support, better compatibility with Node packages, and performance enhancements. What makes Deno interesting in the broader ecosystem is that it's attempting to learn from Node's design decisions and create a more secure, modern runtime. The adoption curve has been gradual but steady, and each release brings it closer to being a viable Node alternative for more use cases. Someone built a Wayland compositor in Minecraft, and yes, you read that correctly. Hacker News gave this 219 points. This is exactly what it sounds like, a functional Wayland display server protocol implementation running inside Minecraft using the game's modding capabilities. It's completely impractical and utterly delightful. The project demonstrates both the flexibility of Minecraft's modding ecosystem and the creative lengths people will go to for the joy of making absurd technical projects work. The comments are full of people discussing the technical challenges involved and sharing other ridiculous but functional projects built inside Minecraft. Now for the security briefing, and we've got some significant vulnerabilities and incidents to cover. Let's start with what's becoming a major story, the CISA data leak. Krebs on Security has multiple articles on this. The headline story is Lawmakers Demand Answers as CISA Tries to Contain Data Leak. This is also featured on Hacker News with 211 points. Then there's another Krebs article titled CISA Admin Leaked AWS Gov Cloud Keys on GitHub. Here's what happened. A CISA administrator accidentally committed AWS Gov Cloud credentials to a public GitHub repository. Gov Cloud is Amazon's cloud environment specifically designed for government workloads with higher security requirements. This exposure is particularly embarrassing because CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is literally the organization responsible for helping secure government systems. Schneier on Security has also covered this under CISA Security Leak. The leaked credentials potentially gave access to sensitive government infrastructure and data. Congressional lawmakers are now demanding explanations about how this happened, what data was exposed, and what safeguards failed. This incident highlights the ongoing challenge of secrets management in the age of cloud infrastructure and version control systems. Moving to the CISA Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog, we have several new additions. First is CVE 2026-9082, added May 22nd with a due date of May 27th. This is a Drupal core SQL injection vulnerability that could allow privilege escalation and remote code execution via specially crafted requests. Bleeping Computer is reporting that this critical SQL injection flaw is now being targeted in attacks. Drupal is a widely used content management system, and SQL injection vulnerabilities are particularly dangerous because they can allow attackers to extract or modify database contents, potentially compromising entire websites. Organizations running Drupal need to patch immediately. You've got until May 27th to comply with the CISA directive. CVE 2026-34926, added May 21st, affects Trend Micro Apex 1. Bleeping Computer warns that Trend Micro is seeing exploitation of this Apex 1 0-day in the wild. This is a directory traversal vulnerability that allows a pre-authenticated local attacker to modify key tab files. Directory traversal vulnerabilities let attackers navigate outside intended directories to access files they shouldn't be able to reach. The fact that this is being actively exploited before a patch was widely available makes it particularly concerning. We've also got some older vulnerabilities added to the KEV catalog, which means CISA has evidence they're being exploited now. CVE 2008-4250 is a Microsoft Windows buffer overflow in the server service that allows remote code execution. CVE 2009-1537 affects Microsoft DirectX with a null byte overwrite vulnerability. CVE 2009-3459 is an Adobe Acrobat and Reader heap-based buffer overflow. CVE 2010-0249 and 2010-0806 are both Internet Explorer use after free vulnerabilities allowing remote code execution. These older CVEs being added suggests attackers are targeting unpatched legacy systems that organizations may have forgotten about or deemed too difficult to patch. Bleeping Computer has several other security stories. The Netherlands has seized 800 servers of a hosting firm that was enabling cyberattacks. This appears to be a bulletproof hosting provider, companies that knowingly host criminal infrastructure and turn a blind eye to malicious activity. The seizure involved international cooperation and demonstrates law enforcement's increasing capability to go after the infrastructure that enables cybercrime rather than just the criminals themselves. Former U.S. executives have pleaded guilty to aiding tech support scammers, according to Bleeping Computer. Tech support scams are those operations where criminals cold call people claiming to be from Microsoft or another tech company, then convince victims to provide remote access and pay for unnecessary services. What makes this case notable is that U.S.-based executives were facilitating these operations, likely providing payment processing or other infrastructure that gave the scams a veneer of legitimacy. Ubiquiti has patched 3 maximum severity Unify OS vulnerabilities, Bleeping Computer reports. Unify is Ubiquiti's networking product line, popular in both enterprise and prosumer environments. Maximum severity means CVSS scores of 10.0, as bad as it gets. Organizations using Unify equipment need to update immediately, as these vulnerabilities likely allow complete compromise of the networking equipment. The US and Canada have arrested and charged the suspected Kimwolf botnet administrator. Krebs on Security has details in an article titled Alleged Kimwolf Botmaster Dort Arrested, Charged in US and Canada. A botnet is a network of compromised computers controlled by an attacker, and Kimwolf was apparently used for various criminal purposes. The international cooperation between U.S. and Canadian law enforcement led to identifying and apprehending the individual known as Dort, who allegedly ran the operation. Google accidentally exposed details of an unfixed Chromium flaw, according to Bleeping Computer. This is a significant operational security failure. Vulnerability details were made public before a patch was available, giving attackers a window to develop exploits. Google has since pulled the disclosure, but once information is public, it's difficult to put that genie back in the bottle. Krebs on Security also covered this month's Patch Tuesday in his Patch Tuesday, May 2026 edition article. Microsoft's monthly patch release included fixes for numerous vulnerabilities across Windows, Office, and other products. Additionally, Krebs reported on a Canvas breach that disrupted schools and colleges nationwide. Canvas is a widely used learning management system, and the breach has affected educational institutions' ability to deliver online coursework and manage grades. Palo Alto's Unit 42 has several threat intelligence reports. They're tracking Iranian APT screening Serpent's 2026 espionage campaigns. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat, which typically means state-sponsored hacking groups. Screening Serpents is apparently an Iranian threat actor conducting espionage operations. Another Unit 42 report covers ROAD tools and nation-state tactics in the cloud, examining how sophisticated attackers are targeting cloud infrastructure. They're also tracking tampered Chef clusters via certificate and code reuse, and examining how Gremlin Stealer malware has evolved its tactics to hide in plain sight using resource files. SANS Internet Storm Center has noted an example of stacked strings in high-level languages and is tracking a cross-platform NPM stealer, malware targeting the Node package manager ecosystem that works across different operating systems. They've also got a piece on selective HTTP proxying in Linux for those managing network configurations. Schneier on Security covered a macOS kernel memory corruption exploit, which is significant because kernel-level exploits allow complete system compromise. He's also written about AI security more broadly, examining the unique security challenges posed by machine learning systems. Looking at the National Vulnerability Database recent CVEs, we're seeing some very old vulnerabilities pop up. CVE 1999-0095 is a sendmail debug command issue with a CVSS of 10.0. CVE 1999-0082 affects FTPD. These ancient CVEs appearing suggests either historical documentation efforts or, more worryingly, that some systems out there are still running software from the 1990s with decades-old vulnerabilities. Segment 6, AI and Machine Learning. Let's dive into some fascinating new research from Archive. First up is a paper on tokenization, that fundamental process that breaks text into pieces for language models to process. The paper, Archive 2605.22821, introduces a new approach using convex relaxations. The researchers point out that current tokenization algorithms like BPE and Unigram are greedy. They make locally optimal choices that might not be globally optimal. This new method tries to find better tokenization schemes through mathematical optimization. Why does this matter? Well, tokenization has a huge impact on model performance, and we're still using techniques from years ago. Better tokenization could mean more efficient models and better understanding of language structure. Next, there's work on neural demand models for retail, Archive 2605.22820. The integrable context-dependent demand network learns demand patterns for multi-product retail scenarios. This is the kind of AI that's actually being deployed right now, helping retailers figure out pricing and inventory. The key innovation here is that the model learns demand potentials in a way that's mathematically well-behaved, which means more stable predictions and better generalization to new scenarios. Then we have research on test-time search and diversity in language models, Archive 2605.22817. This paper introduces vector policy optimization, which trains models to generate diverse outputs that work well with inference-time search procedures like AlphaEvolve. The researchers found that training for diversity during the initial training phase actually improves performance when you do sophisticated search at test time. This is particularly relevant as we see more systems combining pre-trained models with search algorithms to solve complex problems. There's also fascinating work on exploration in 3D environments, Archive 2605.22814. The paper tackles how AI agents can effectively explore sparse reward environments by maintaining episodic memory and persistent world models. This is crucial for robotics and embodied AI. Agents need to remember what they've seen and build mental maps of their environment to explore efficiently. The researchers show that curiosity-driven exploration combined with better memory systems leads to much more effective learning. Moving to broader AI news from the data, Anthropic has posted an initial update on Project Glasswing. According to Hacker News, where this scored 437 points with 261 comments, this appears to be a significant research initiative. I'll link the full details from anthropic.com in the show notes. There's also interesting drama in the AI tools space. The Verge is reporting that Microsoft has started canceling Claude Code licenses internally. This is significant. Claude Code is Anthropic's coding assistant that competes with GitHub Copilot, which Microsoft owns. According to the reporting, this appears to be Microsoft consolidating around its own AI tools rather than paying for competing services. This kind of platform competition is going to shape what developers actually have access to. Over on GitHub Trending, we're seeing some interesting AI-related projects gaining traction. There's Chrome DevTools MCP, that's the Model Context Protocol integration for Chrome DevTools. Also trending is something called AI Engineering from Scratch by Rohit00, and there are official Claude plugins from Anthropic appearing in the trending list. The MCP protocol is becoming increasingly important as we see more tools trying to give language models controlled access to external systems. On the research infrastructure side, there's a paper about finite particle convergence rates for conservative and non-conservative drifting models, Archive 2605.22795. This is more theoretical work on the mathematical foundations of diffusion models and generative AI. Understanding convergence rates helps us build more efficient training procedures and better understand when these models will produce reliable outputs. Finally, there's work on what the researchers call the matching principle for nuisance-robust representation learning, Archive 2605.22800. This tackles a fundamental problem in machine learning. How do you learn representations that are robust to confounding variables? The paper proposes a geometric theory of loss functions that helps models learn features that are invariant to nuisances while still capturing the signal you care about. This has applications across domain adaptation, robustness, and compositional generalization. The broader theme across these papers is that we're seeing more sophisticated approaches to fundamental problems: better tokenization, better exploration, better robustness, better mathematical foundations. The field is maturing beyond just scaling up transformer models. Segment 6, Homelab and Infrastructure. Let's talk about what's happening in the Homelab and infrastructure world. Starting with some exciting news from the development community, Deno 2.8 has been released. According to Hacker News, where this scored 362 points, this release includes significant improvements to the JavaScript and TypeScript runtime. Deno continues to be an interesting alternative to Node, especially for security-conscious developers who want better defaults and modern features built in. There's a truly wild project that caught my attention, Waylandcraft. This scored 219 points on Hacker News. Someone has built a Wayland compositor that runs inside Minecraft. Yes, you read that right, a window manager running as a Minecraft mod. You can find it on modrinth.com. This is the kind of delightfully absurd engineering that makes the open source community so entertaining. But it's also technically impressive. Implementing the Wayland protocol is non-trivial, and doing it inside a game engine shows real understanding of both systems. For anyone working with open source licenses, there's an important story developing. Bamboo Studio has apparently been violating the Prusa Slicer AGPL license since they forked the project. Joseph Prusa himself called this out on social media. This is a reminder that AGPL is a strong copyleft license. If you fork AGPL code and distribute it, you must also release your modifications under AGPL. License compliance matters, especially in the 3D printing community where open source hardware and software have been fundamental to the ecosystem. Speaking of 3D modeling, there's interesting benchmark news. Antigravity 2.0 is topping the OpenSCAD architectural 3D LLM benchmark, according to a post on modelrift.com that scored 387 points on Hacker News. This shows how AI models are getting better at generating programmatic CAD designs. OpenSCAD is a script-based modeling tool, so this is really about whether language models can write good geometric code. The fact that we're seeing specialized benchmarks for this use case shows how quickly AI capabilities are expanding into technical domains. Over on Lobsters, there's a post about sb.h, described as the standard library that C deserves. This scored 11 points and represents ongoing frustration with CS minimal standard library. The modern C developer often needs to pull in multiple dependencies for basic functionality that comes built into other languages. Projects like this try to provide a batteries-included experience while staying true to C's philosophy. For network automation folks, there's discussion on Lobsters about XF86 audio play issues on Linux, the mysterious problems with media key handling. This scored 21 points. These kinds of deep system integration issues are surprisingly common, and the debugging process often reveals interesting interactions between different layers of the Linux desktop stack. Mozilla has posted about designing Firefox for the future, according to Lobsters, where it scored 34 points. Browser development is fascinating right now because we're seeing attempts to modernize interfaces that have been fundamentally similar for 25 years. How do you evolve something that hundreds of millions of people use daily without disrupting their workflow? There's also discussion about GNUtella, the peer-to-peer protocol that somehow is still alive. The post on rickcarlino.com, which scored 94 points on Lobsters, explores how this protocol has outlived the world that created it. In the early 2000s, GNUtella was how you shared files in a decentralized way before BitTorrent became dominant. The fact that it's still functioning is a testament to robust protocol design. For Kubernetes users, there's interesting activity on GitHub with projects related to Helm, container security, and OCI standards trending. The container ecosystem continues to evolve, with more focus on security and supply chain integrity after various attacks on package repositories. Looking at Docker and Podman, both continue to see active development. Docker Compose remains the easy on-ramp for most developers, while Podman is gaining ground in enterprise environments where rootless containers and better security defaults matter. The OCI standards work ensures these tools remain interoperable. On the cloud front, Cloudflare workers and pages continue to be interesting for edge computing. Serverless is maturing beyond just functions as a service into more sophisticated edge computing patterns. The ability to run code geographically close to users with minimal cold start times is changing how we think about application architecture. From ahead.com, there's a wealth of new resources on infrastructure and AI. They've published a piece on building production-ready AI factories, covering the infrastructure requirements for actually deploying AI at scale. There's also an executive playbook for liquid-cooled infrastructure for AI. As GPU clusters get denser and hotter, liquid cooling is moving from exotic to necessary. Ahead has also published benchmark results for single-card LLM inference on Intel Gaudi 3, which is important for organizations evaluating alternatives to NVIDIA for AI workloads. They've also got resources on ServiceNow Knowledge 2026, covering what actually matters from that conference for IT operations teams. And there's a piece on turning Broadcom VCF and VKS entitlements into a modern private cloud. This is particularly relevant after Broadcom's acquisition of VMware and the licensing changes that followed. Organizations with existing VMware investments need strategies for making the most of what they have. For security operations, Ahead published the Defenders program for a post-Mythos world, dealing with macOS security after recent high-profile exploits. They're also covering reimagining IT operations with agentic AI, which ties into the broader theme of how AI is changing system administration and operations work. This is the future of infrastructure, not just running servers, but running AI workloads, securing complex supply chains, and increasingly relying on intelligent automation to manage it all. Segment 8 is Science and Space. Let's look up at the cosmos and see what's happening in space and science. NASA's astronomy picture of the day continues to showcase stunning imagery. I'll link today's selection in the show notes at apod.nasa.gov. In NASA news, there's a call for creatives. NASA is seeking help illuminating mission storytelling. This is part of NASA's ongoing effort to make space science more accessible and engaging to the public. If you're a visual artist, writer, or multimedia creator interested in space, this might be worth checking out on nasa.gov. There's also coverage being set for a Roscosmos spacewalk outside the International Space Station. These Russian spacewalks continue despite geopolitical tensions, showing that space cooperation remains one of the few areas where international partnership endures. The ISS is a remarkable achievement, a permanently crewed orbiting laboratory that's been continuously occupied for over 25 years. NASA also announced it will compete the contract for Jet Propulsion Laboratory Management. JPL is one of NASA's crown jewels, responsible for most of NASA's robotic planetary exploration. The decision to compete this contract rather than simply renew it signals NASA is looking at potentially changing how this critical facility is managed. The Webb Space Telescope continues its science mission. NASA posted an image article about Webb studying star clusters. The James Webb Space Telescope is revolutionizing our understanding of the early universe, finding galaxies that formed surprisingly quickly after the Big Bang and revealing the chemical compositions of exoplanet atmospheres in unprecedented detail. NASA is also working on keeping aircraft ready. There's an article from Armstrong Flight Research Center about ground crews ensuring aircraft readiness. NASA operates a fleet of specialized aircraft for research purposes, everything from modified passenger jets that study the atmosphere to supersonic test platforms. The ground crews that maintain these unique aircraft are unsung heroes of aerospace research. Now, SpaceX had a major launch. According to multiple sources including PBS and NPR, SpaceX launched its biggest, most beefed-up Starship yet on a test flight. This is Starship version 3, a massive rocket that's central to SpaceX's plans for Mars colonization and NASA's Artemis program to return humans to the moon. Each test flight pushes the envelope further, testing new systems and demonstrating capabilities that were science fiction just a few years ago. The Starship program represents a fundamental shift in how we think about space access. These vehicles are designed to be fully and rapidly reusable, potentially dropping the cost per kilogram to orbit by orders of magnitude. If SpaceX succeeds in making Starship operational and affordable, it opens up possibilities from space tourism to orbital manufacturing to serious Mars colonization efforts. In international space news, Ars Technica is reporting that 4 Russian satellites are now within striking distance of an ICEYE radarsat. ICEYE is a Finnish company that operates radar imaging satellites, and they've been supporting Ukraine with reconnaissance data. The fact that Russian satellites are maneuvering close to ICEYE's constellation is concerning. It demonstrates Russia's anti-satellite capabilities and raises questions about the safety of commercial satellites involved in conflicts. This brings up the broader issue of space as a contested domain. We tend to think of space as peaceful and cooperative, but it's increasingly a military and intelligence frontier. Satellites enable modern warfare. They provide communications, navigation, targeting, and reconnaissance. The ability to threaten or disable an adversary's satellites is now a key capability. Looking at Earth science, there's important research on climate change threatening global plant species as their habitats shrink, according to Reuters. This isn't just about polar bears and coral reefs. The changing climate is causing rapid shifts in where plants can survive, and many species can't migrate fast enough to keep up with changing conditions. This has implications for agriculture, forestry, and ecosystem stability. The intersection of space technology and Earth observation is crucial here. Satellites give us the data to track these changes in real time, measuring forest cover, ice extent, ocean temperatures, and atmospheric composition with precision that would be impossible from the ground alone. Segment 9, Business and Economy. Let's talk about what's happening in business and the economy. Bloomberg is reporting on factory activity globally, with the headline that factory activity is sagging due to inflation pressures. We're seeing a complex economic picture where inflation remains stubborn despite central bank efforts, and manufacturing is feeling the squeeze from higher input costs and uncertain demand. The European Central Bank is facing difficult decisions. Bloomberg reports that ECB board member Stornaras is saying a rate hike may be inevitable to maintain credibility. This is notable because most major central banks have been trying to bring inflation down, and the question of when and how quickly to adjust rates is critical. Too aggressive and you risk recession, too timid and inflation becomes entrenched. Bloomberg also has a fascinating interview with architect Norman Foster on why the West struggles to build big infrastructure projects. Foster has designed some of the world's most iconic buildings, and his perspective on why large-scale construction has become so difficult in developed countries is worth attention. Regulatory complexity, labor costs, planning delays all contribute to a situation where major infrastructure that would have taken 5 years to build decades ago now takes 15. In tech industry news, there's significant activity around memory prices. According to a Reddit post on r/Homelab that scored over 1,200 points, memory prices are tipped to fall as China starts flooding the market with DRAM and NAND chips. This is huge for anyone building servers or upgrading systems. Memory has been a significant cost for the past few years, and a supply increase could make infrastructure upgrades much more affordable. This ties into broader geopolitical and economic issues around semiconductor manufacturing. China has been investing heavily in memory production, trying to reduce dependence on Korean and American suppliers. If Chinese production ramps up significantly, it changes the global market dynamics. On the corporate culture front, there's a disturbing story from Reuters about a bank boss apologizing after describing workers as lower-value human capital. This scored over 4,000 points on Reddit's World News. This kind of rhetoric reveals how some executives actually view their workforce, and it sparked justified outrage. Employees are human beings with value beyond their economic productivity, and language matters in shaping organizational culture. Looking at crypto and alternative assets, the market remains volatile with ongoing uncertainty around regulation and real-world use cases. The enthusiasm of the last cycle has cooled, but development on blockchain infrastructure and decentralized finance continues. For the housing market, conditions remain challenging in many U.S. metros, including Chicago. High interest rates have made mortgages expensive, but home prices haven't fallen as much as might be expected because inventory remains constrained. Would-be sellers are staying put rather than giving up their low-rate mortgages, which keeps supply tight. Inflation more broadly shows signs of moderating but remains above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. Energy costs are a wild card. Geopolitical instability affects oil prices, and electricity costs are rising partly due to increasing AI and data center demand. On startups and funding, venture capital remains more cautious than during the pandemic boom years. Companies are focusing more on profitability and less on growth at all costs. The era of cheap money is over, and that's forcing more disciplined business models. The tech industry continues to see layoffs and restructuring, particularly at companies that overhired during the pandemic. At the same time, there's aggressive hiring for AI talent. The skills shortage in machine learning and AI infrastructure is real, and compensation for experienced people in these fields remains very high. Segment 10 outro that wraps up today's episode of the Clovis Brief. We covered a lot of ground today, from serious security vulnerabilities and breaking news to fascinating research in AI and space exploration. It's Saturday, May 23, 2026, and the technology world never stops moving. Tomorrow we'll dig into any developing stories from this weekend, plus I'm planning to explore some of the more technical aspects of the infrastructure topics we touched on today. There's always more to unpack. Thank you for spending part of your Saturday with me. Whether you're catching up on news while doing chores, out for a walk, or just settling in with coffee, I appreciate you being here. Stay curious, stay secure, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is the Clovis Brief.